We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
As the saying goes, a country without borders is no country at all. Is that the ever-pressing future for the last beacon of hope, the United States? The administration has lost complete control of the southern border, and President Biden either doesn't know how or doesn't care to deal with it. Throw in a volatile Wall Street, some major changes in Congress, and some very poor messaging. And what we have is the perfect storm of disaster hidden behind a veil of political posturing. But it might not all be bad news. Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we'll be dissecting what went wrong with Joe Biden's honeymoon in the White House and how the moneymen of Wall Street are hedging their bets. We'll also be going to figure out precisely how the border situation descended into humanitarian chaos. And we'll be talking liberty with Scott Cosenza to examine the future of abortion and religious freedom in the United States of America. I'd like to say a special thank you to our listeners on WARK on 1490 AM and 98.9 FM out of Hagerstown, Maryland. Thanks for being part of the team. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. It's time to talk about Uncle Joe. The honeymoon is officially over, and the grim reality of having a knee-jerk reaction president at the helm is beginning to bite home for many voters. Recent polling puts President Biden firmly in negative territory. In fact, the only poll that gave him any plus approval at all was a Fox News survey. Afghanistan, the border, lies, cover-ups, and a general air of incompetence surround the beloved commander-in-chief. Why the mainstream press so late to the party? Well, to figure out how a wave of optimism turned to a tsunami of despair in less than a year, we're joined by Liberty Nation's own editor-in-chief, Miss Lisa K. Donna. Welcome aboard, Lisa.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Absolutely fantastic, although I am troubled by events on your side of the Atlantic. So my first question has to be, how did this go so wrong so quickly on such a monumental scale? And why did the media ignore every single red flag that was so apparent to everyone else?
Well, I guess we have to begin with Mr. Biden's approval ratings. As of this week, Rasmussen reports, they do a daily presidential tracking poll, and it showed that 45% of likely U.S. voters approve of Biden's job performance and 55% disapprove. Interestingly, that's the same exact number registered by President Trump 1 year ago. But really what this says to me is that Biden's unity message doesn't appear to be working. As for the media, Mark, I don't think they were ignoring the red flag so much as they've been openly rooting for Biden and often construct an entirely different narrative. Again, this takes us back to this false unity message of the Biden administration.
Yeah, it seems more so they're the enablers of somebody struggling with a problem, which, as we know, only makes the problem worse. Now, I think it's that to many it seems that Biden's efforts to undo Donald Trump's legacy is what's landed him in this position. Now, he has the border out of control, and the only realistic way of regaining that control is, as many people put it, immediately adopt Donald Trump's policies. What do you think of that?
Well, your question reminds me of Proverbs 16:18, a pretty famous quote from the Bible, which says, "Pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before stumbling," or something like that. Anyway, Joe Biden has been stumbling a lot. The Afghan withdrawal was, I think that woke up much of the pro-Biden media. I think the administration was quite shocked at having to answer some difficult questions from its friends, especially after the deaths of 13 military personnel. And that led Biden and company into a rush for revenge. So then they decided to drop a bomb on an innocent Afghani and 7 kids, kind of a get me somebody, anybody to drone and get me somebody while I'm waiting. Unsurprisingly, the mainstream media didn't play up that mistake. And then just to finish up, came the images out of Del Rio, Texas. And again, the tough questions came from friends like Gayle King, who went toe-to-toe with Jen Psaki on CBS this week.
So it seems to me that the media are experiencing maybe not buyer's regret, but more Biden's regret. I mean, they've put the house, the farm, and the store on getting the Biden-Harris ticket in, and Now they're dealing with the fallout of it. We see, as you spoke about recently, that Black Haitians being deported and told not to come anymore. And yet the Fourth Estate, they can't use the same messaging that they used during the Trump era. This was their fodder, and now they're being forced by their politically biased ideology to stay silent. It's not a good look for them. It's not a good look for the president. And I don't see for how much longer they can keep it going. Now, do they have a battle plan, the Fourth Estate here? And does that plan involve crowning Queen Kamala Harris?
Well, it's funny you've asked two important questions here. One centers around the media and the other around the political fallout. So I'll take the media first. Where they've been struggling is how to get around these disturbing images, like women being whipped in Afghanistan, the shanty town next to the bridge near Del Rio. You can argue narrative all the livelong day, Mark, but when pictures are telling the story, it's very, very difficult to counter those. Perhaps that's why, you may remember, the FAA tried to shut down the Fox drones that were flying over the Rio Grande.
For those listeners who aren't familiar with that, it's just after Fox News drones flew over taking pictures and footage of all the migrants under the bridge. The immediate response from the administration was to order the FAA to stop drone flights for 2 weeks. So no more migrants, just no more pictures of migrants.
Well, exactly. Such a poor optic for the Biden administration. The FAA finally had to back down. The negative publicity was just embarrassing. So, that's the media portion of your question. Now, as far as the political fallout, I think the midterms will be the tell. There's strong indications that the Trump train is beginning to pull out of the station, as politics in the midterms are wont to do around Labor Day. And that certainly puts the fear of God into the Democrats. But we really won't know how bad things are for the Dems until the midterms are over. Should the GOP pull ahead, that's going to signal a serious problem for Biden in terms of governing.
Let's move on to President Biden's mega spending plan. He wants to pass bills that total almost $5 trillion, which, as we know, is more like 6.5 to 7 when all's said and done, that he likely sees as an FDR New Deal or an LBJ Great Society. But to get it, he's going to have to do some pretty drastic actions, right? He either has to ignore the Senate parliamentarian, scrap the filibuster, or, and oh, the horror here, compromise with Republicans. Which one do you think he's going to go for?
I'm not sure, but, you might ask about unity, the unity that was promised he was going to work bipartisanly. Do you remember that?
I think everybody remembers it. And as you pointed out in the polling, it's the unity that is really hurting Biden in these polls.
Yeah, and here's where the Republicans just, going back to the 6.5 or the 5.2 or the trillions. Here's where the Republicans have to put their eggs: in the Joe Manchin basket. He doesn't seem like someone willing to back down. He's flat out against mega spending, as you would call it. He wouldn't have written this up in the in the Wall Street Journal if he planned on taking a dive. So I think this Bernie structured socialist takeover of the U.S. economy is DOA, dead on arrival.
Now, final question for you, Lisa. Let's apply a little bit of that pop psychology 101 that you're so famous for. Now, how are the various interested parties feeling about this catastrophe that is so far the Biden presidency? And how is Biden himself feeling?
Well, it's impossible to get into somebody else's head, but Biden looks and sounds for all the world like he's in over his head. And I think you can see that in the multiple crises swirling now, just 8 months into his presidency. The right has focused much of its criticism of Biden around his cognitive deficits, and, fair enough. But what I've been writing a lot about for Liberty Nation is more of the Biden psychological profile. This guy, Mark, who's been lauded for his compassion, Mr. Nice Guy theme, in comparison with Orange Man Bad. But what we're witnessing is not the result of a nice guy. Nice guys don't let Marines get slaughtered. Nice guys don't bomb innocent Afghanis. Nice guys don't permit third, or some are saying fourth world humanitarian crisis to take place at the border. And now the polls are showing Americans are not buying this unity narrative. So I guess it's getting to be a situation of you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all the time.
And that may well be an adage that comes back to haunt Joe Biden in 2022. Lisa K. Donna, thank you ever so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Now, don't go anywhere. Later in the show, we'll be talking about upcoming Supreme Court cases in our special Talking Liberty segment. But before that, after this short break, we'll be back with Andrew Moran to see what's happening on Wall Street and Main Street. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.